It's like watching paint dry.
I did that this week.
Yeah,
Now you know how I feel. Watching the clock.
that's right. Okay, I have 7 o'clock. Any questions? Ready to go? All right, thanks, you guys. I appreciate it, and best of luck to all of you. All right, here we go.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. On behalf of the American Association of University Women, the Watertown branch, I would like to welcome you to tonight's Assembly District 37 Candidate Forum. Our moderator for this evening's event is Jill Nadeau. Jill is the producer and fill-in host for the Larry Mueller Show, heard around the state on Wisconsin Public Radio. She formerly worked as the coordinator for Watertown TV and hosted many local shows. With that, I introduce you to tonight's moderator, Jill Nadeau.
Thank you very much, Pat. And just as a reminder, this is a special election for Assembly District 37. Voting will take place on July 13th. Members of the Wisconsin State Assembly serve 2-year terms. I'd like to welcome the candidates and thank them for taking the time to talk to voters. We are happy that all 3 candidates agreed to be with us for this forum. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce himself, and then I'll ask the first of 12 questions. They will have 1 minute to answer each. The order that the candidates will answer will alternate. The original order was determined alphabetically by last name. A slide will appear for each question, and after I read the question, the name of the candidate that will start will be listed. When that happens, the candidate will begin. There will be 30-second and 15-second reminders. I will not introduce each speaker. They will respond when their name appears on the screen. And after the last question, candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Let's begin with our first introduction.
Good evening. My name is Pete Adams. I live in Columbus, Wisconsin. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and never in my life did I think that I was going to live in a small town. But a little over 17 years ago, my wife and I happened upon the perfect situation in Columbus, and we settled down, made our roots, and now we are continuing to raise 3 amazing children in Columbus. And I cannot imagine moving back to a big city. So when it comes to our campaign, we have 3 main pillars. We need an economy that works for the middle class. We need an equitable education system that supports all Wisconsin students. And we need to invest in infrastructure, both traditional infrastructure and 21st century infrastructure. So when we talk about an economy that works for the middle class, what I'm really talking about is gearing the economy towards the demand side of the capitalism equation, because capitalism is about supply and demand. So from 1940 to 1980, we had an economy that was geared towards the demand side of the equation. And the result was a strong, vibrant middle class. From 1980 till now, we've dabbled in supply side economics. And the result of supply side economics is a shrinking middle class with less purchasing power. So we need to refocus Wisconsin's economy on the demand side of the equation. We also need to ensure that our school districts provide the same educational opportunities to all Wisconsin students. I mean, we very clearly have school districts that are the haves, and we have school districts that are the have-nots. We need to ensure equilibrium in education, and we need to ensure that private schools, if they're taking public money, they need to show their test scores. In terms of infrastructure, I have no idea why and how infrastructure became a hot button issue. We know that we have roads and bridges that are reaching the end of their life expectancy. We know that we have areas that we need to build capacities for our traditional infrastructure. And these projects, for every dollar that we spend, creates $6 in local economic revenue. So we need to get this done for Wisconsin. Finally, we need to build 21st century infrastructure, which includes broadband, wind, solar, and electric vehicle charging stations, as well as energy efficiency projects. So if we all pull together, we can get these done and take care of these needs for Wisconsinites.
Hello, I'm Will Penterman. I'm a lifelong Wisconsinite. I was born and raised on a small dairy farm here in Wisconsin. My wife Abby and I are proud residents here in Columbus. I serve as the treasurer at my local church. I'm a member of my local Kiwanis chapter, and I donate blood on a regular basis. I am proud to have served my country in the armed forces, and my dedication to service is why I'm running to be your state representative. I believe very strongly in limited governments, a government that works for the people and does not take away their rights and freedoms. The people of the 37th Assembly District work hard, and they expect a representative who will work hard for them. And that is why I've been out every single day, knocking on doors and talking with you, the constituents and the voters. I want to hear from you, and I want to listen. Our district faces an array of challenges, such as jumpstarting the economy, especially after the coronavirus pandemic, reining in unnecessary government spending, and getting our kids the best possible education, and ensuring that our families have quality, affordable health care. This evening, I'd like to thank the American Association of University Women, the Watertown branch, Pat Ludwig, and Watertown TV for their efforts to put on this event. And I look forward to discussing these topics more in depth with you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Ratzlaff. I live in DeForest. I have for the past 17 years. I would also like to thank the American Association of University Women Watertown branch for hosting this forum and having us all here tonight. I'd also like to thank the other candidates so we could all be together and share our views. First thing I'd like to tell people is I'm a conservative, an independent, and I believe the rational choice for this district. I'm a business professional. I'm also a state licensed advanced emergency medical technician. So I have served the community for close to 20 years. I got almost my 20 years in as a volunteer medic. As an independent candidate, I will make it a priority to work with both parties to accomplish meaningful legislation that works for the people. As a conservative, I will also fight to uphold conservative principles, which all people in Wisconsin deserve. I believe personally that there are three major issues confronting us today. The first one would be the gerrymandering and the redistricting. I believe that constituents should pick their elected officials, not the other way around, as has been for the past decade or more. The second would be infrastructure. Ours is crumbling, even as we speak. The third would be term limits. I'm not a career politician. I already have a career, and I don't plan on becoming one, as it were. So thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go on to our first question. We know that the legislative districts will be redrawn. How do you think that the process should be facilitated?
Well, first and foremost, Wisconsin is so gerrymandered, it's a national disgrace. So in 2018, the Democrats garnered 53% of the vote, but only got 36% of the seats in the assembly. That trend continues in the 2020 election, where the Democrats underperformed with the vote totals that they had. So in the 37th district, there's no greater example of this gerrymandering for partisan gain than DeForest, where DeForest is split into 3 different districts. In terms of how we're going to fix the gerrymandering situation, all we have to do is look at Iowa. Iowa has a nonpartisan redistricting team, and they're not allowed to use political data in order to create their boundaries. So again, I agree with my independent colleague. The voters should pick the representatives. The representatives should not pick the voters. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it all on the campaign trail. It's really hard to gerrymander a square.
Thank you for the question. For this, it's important to understand, first of all, why we need redistricting. Redistricting is important because it helps ensure equal representation. Wisconsin is divided amongst 99 assembly districts, and each district needs to have the same number of people. This is why we have redistricting in the first place. I believe that legislative maps should be compact. They need to be contiguous. They need to preserve communities of common interests. Right now, The city of Watertown is a community of common interest, but it's divided amongst two counties, Dodge County and Jefferson County. And if you draw a nice square, you divide the community right down the middle. And I just don't believe in a one size fits all formula. I think that you have to preserve communities of interest. And under the current system, the legislature will draw the maps and the governor will have to approve them. If he does not, we will not have new maps. So the maps that will be drawn must be bipartisan, and that's exactly what the citizens of Wisconsin want.
Thank you for the question. I believe that we should draw, like my Democratic friend, Mr. Adams, we should take after the Iowa model. I fully support the reintroduction of Assembly Bill 303 and SB 288, which deals with redistricting, which was not brought to a public forum by the Republicans for some reason. And as far as keeping communities together, exactly, I still don't understand why DeForest needs to be cut up into 3 assembly districts and into 3 Senate districts, and how it makes sense to go across the street from the Capitol in a glass bank building, sign an oath of secrecy, and then draw the maps using computer-driven data. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I'm not for that. So that's my answer to that question.
Question number 2. What do you see as District 37's broadband needs, and how will you pay for those needs?
Yeah, so broadband is a really, really important issue, not only to this district, but to the whole state of Wisconsin. It's something that we saw because of the pandemic. There were, so many people had to go online, and we saw the lack of broadband, quality broadband in Wisconsin. Right now, 400,000 Wisconsinites do not have access to high-speed internet. That's a problem. So how do we fix it, and how do we pay for it, more importantly? Well, the current proposed budget has about $125 million in bonding for the broadband expansion grant program. And I think that's a really good start. I'd personally like to see more money invested in broadband. There was a bill that tried to invest $500 million in broadband expansion under the ARPA funds that we got from the federal government. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed. So this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bipartisan topic that Republicans, Democrats, and Independents can all get behind. And
I believe that broadband is an issue. I believe in a lot of rural areas, there is not enough coverage. And I believe there's probably already enough federal money out there in the form of block grants to pay for this. And there should be an easy way, bipartisan path forward to get this done. One thing the pandemic has taught us, as Mr. Penterman had said, you have kids who have to basically go to their mom and dad's work, to get access to the internet because they weren't in school. And that was the only way that they could get online. And to me, that's kind of a travesty and kind of a shame. All people should have the same access to the internet. Thank you.
So if we're talking about broadband, this is going to sound strange, but we need to talk about Chattanooga, Tennessee. So they laid hundreds of miles of fiber optic cable connecting to every home and business in the service area. So their network provides internet, voice, and video to its customers and is one of the fastest internet providers in the world with up to 10 gigabytes per second. So it has enhanced local economic development while offering no cost service to families that need it the most. So their broadband is so good that Consumer Reports are at the best in the country. So essentially, Chattanooga gave us the template to how to build broadband effectively and efficiently in America. They have the template. We need to borrow that template, follow it, and bring it to Wisconsin. How we're going to pay for it, we have $1 billion of surplus money that's sitting out there that we need to invest in infrastructure in Wisconsin. This seems like the most logical choice to use a portion of that money so we can connect our rural folks and keep, when we have school outages, we can keep our kids connected to schools.
Question number 3. How do you feel about the election legislation changes that were currently passed by the Assembly and Senate and are now on Governor Evers' desk?
As far as the Republican-controlled legislation, as far as the election, I really didn't see any type of hanky-panky. I believe that the elections in 2016 and in 2020 were fair. I believe Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, as did President Trump in 2020. I am a fan of public financing for elections. As far as getting rid of the private money, I know Mr. Penterman had talked about the 5 biggest cities that receive private money. I'm not a fan of that either, because you can't tell me that this democracy in the park that the city of Madison put on wasn't meant to benefit the Democrats, because I can guarantee you right now, they weren't voting for President Trump. So that's basically where I stand on that.
So when we're talking about voter legislation, for Republicans, voter suppression is the rule and not the exception. So prior to the 2020 election, they tried to purge over 200,000 voters from the rolls. Thankfully, the Wisconsin Supreme Court stopped that. What's different now is that the Republican Party has been taken over by conspiracy theories regarding the 2020 election. The focus should not be on the conspiracies, but how to make sure everyone has equal access to the ballot and how to ensure it takes less than 2 hours to vote. So the sad truth is that there are not enough Republicans with honor and integrity and courage to tell the truth, and that Joe Biden won the election fair and square. And because of that, 57% of the Republican base believes that the election was stolen. And of that percentage, there's a significant amount of QAnoners, 3%ers, Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys that are trying to foment a second civil war. So for the honor of your country and to defend the Constitution, I would ask my fellow candidates to condemn these conspiracies and affirm that the election was fair.
All right, getting back to the topic at hand, these specific bills, there's a lot to unpack under these bills, and there's unfortunately a minute isn't going to be fast enough for me to unpack all of the bills. I would like to highlight, as Mr. Ratzlaff pointed out, the bill to get private money out of funding our elections. To me, it should be a bipartisan bill. I don't understand how a billionaire from out of state dumping millions of dollars into Wisconsin's elections is healthy for our democracy. I don't understand how this doesn't it gives the appearance of corruption, and a lot of people are concerned because of things like this. I just flat across the board, I don't care where the private money's coming from. I don't care who's spending it. I want to get private money out of our elections. Should be a bipartisan bill, and it should be passed sooner rather than later.
Question number 4. What are 3 ways that you would promote economic development in District 37?
So in terms of economic development, the middle class is the main engine of growth for the state. So we need to incentivize manufacturers moving to Wisconsin. So the western portion of the state is blessed with silica sand. We've got aluminum foundries in the central Wisconsin, and we have 10 manufacturers of solar panels in the United States. I think it makes sense to go after some of these manufacturers and see if we can incentivize them to come to the Midwest, and specifically in the 37th district, to provide good paying jobs, manufacturing jobs. We should also restructure the tax code to ensure that employers pay a living wage, essentially by investing in their workers and investing in their businesses. They get their tax cuts that way rather than having their tax cuts for nothing up front. But these incentives should not be misconstrued as giveaways, though. It's going to be tied to full-time Wisconsin employees and part-time Wisconsin employees. If they fail to meet their employment goals, they do not get those incentives.
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues that I've heard about on the doors is workforce housing development. I know that the low-income tax credit program created under Governor Scott Walker has been an incredibly effective tool at creating affordable housing units. I support this program, and I support good legislation that removes barriers for anyone looking to own their home for anyone looking to own their own home. Another critical component is economic development. For economic development is quality education. Investing in K through 12 education is important, but so are technical colleges. Four-year universities are not for everyone, and they do not prepare students for some of the good paying jobs that are in high demand. Jobs in the manufacturing, agriculture, and trade industries are plentiful, and they offer good paying wages. I want to encourage our young people to pursue technical colleges and apprenticeships as good options instead of just looking at four-year degrees.
The first thing and the biggest thing I can think of to promote economic development in District 37 and all over the state is to get the state back open. I mean, get businesses back open, get schools back open, drop all the COVID restrictions, which I think were overly harsh. And then to my Republican colleagues' point, I am a big believer in the technical schools. I think they're overlooked. I know a lot of people in the trades, they say they can't get anybody because I believe that a lot of these students are sold on four-year colleges, and the only thing that they get is basically a pile of debt. I mean, there's a shortage of people in the construction trades, welders, things like that. And then the third thing I would say is probably to make sure that the corporate tax rate is not too harsh or punitive. Thank you.
Question 5. What is the biggest funding challenge facing our public schools?
So public education is, and just education in general, hits very near and dear to my heart. My wife, Abby, is a public school teacher, and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of education in Wisconsin. However, there are so many. This once again, this is a lot to unpack in just a minute. And there, with the funding formula, it's a very complicated matter that takes more than a minute to go through. But I want to support our students more than anything. Having our students receive the best quality education is best not only for their future, but for the future for the state as a whole. So overall, yes, getting money to where it needs to be in education, just spending more and more money on it on face value doesn't necessarily produce better results, but also doing it in a responsible manner that doesn't drive up the costs and increase property taxes.
I would say the biggest funding challenge would be to consistently have a 2/3 funding guaranteed at the state level consistently. I know that was something that was talked about even back in the 1990s with Governor Thompson. Apparently, the Republican legislature has said that they've gotten their this budget, which basically they're taking federal funds, from what I understand, and basically using that to backfill the education budget, and then basically are going to cut taxes, which to me is basically just playing a shell game, if you ask me. But that's basically where I stand on that.
I would just like to concur with my independent colleague over there. It is a shell game. We need to find a long-term solution for funding our schools. There's no reason why teachers should be using their own money to buy supplies for students. And more importantly, we need to fund our district's special education programs. And what this means is fully staffing special education assistants, fully staffing special education teachers. We also need to ensure that we have equal opportunity education for our children. And I said it before, and I'll say again, we clearly have districts that are the haves and districts that are the have-nots. And these differences are more pronounced when you compare urban to rural areas. So another, the 2/3 idea, I think, is something that we can all get on board. And I appreciate you bringing that up. But we also have a mental health crisis in this country when it comes to school shootings. We need to ensure there is at least one full-time counselor for every school to focus on improving our children's mental health so we can hopefully prevent another mass casualty event. And it is vitally important that we give our next generation of Wisconsinites a quality education, because they will have to solve a lot of problems that we are leaving to them.
The maintenance of roads and bridges is a large expense for local governments. How would you ensure that they receive adequate funding?
Oh, yeah, this is kind of like what I this is one of my reasons for running, my main reasons. That's a simple thing. So in the years, let's see, from April 1st, 1985 to 2006, Wisconsin had indexed its gasoline tax to the cost of, basically they indexed it to the cost of living or to the consumer price index, which means that we're down about 5.8 cents a gallon from where we should be. And as cars become more electrified, that's just going to get worse and worse because cars are becoming more and more fuel efficient. And that's something that the Republicans in the Assembly and the Dane County Board of Supervisors and the City of Madison Common Council, they can't seem to understand how that works, or they just basically blow it off for whatever reason. So that's not limited to any one party. That's both parties that have been playing the game called kick the can down the road. So that's basically where I stand on that. Thank you.
Well, let's pick that can up and let's take care of it. So we have a golden opportunity right now because we have a budget surplus. We need to take that money and we need to invest it in our roads and we need to invest it in our bridges. And I've said it before and I'll say it one more time. For every dollar that we spend in public infrastructure projects, $6 is pumped right back into the local economy. So it makes perfect sense to use some of these funds that is in the surplus to get that out there to have good union paying jobs. Now, in terms of like a long-term solution, after we get these initial projects done, we can start talking about, the gasoline tax or find some other way to fund these roads. Again, it sounds like kicking the can down the road, but at least we can get a jump on it right now. We also need to start getting our 21st century infrastructure built with electric vehicle charging stations. We have to incentivize it in garages. We have to incentivize it in public square. We also need to incentivize solar panels on houses and also places of business. If we work together, we've done, amazing things like the Hoover Dam, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the interstate highway system. We can do it again if we come together as Americans for the infrastructure in the 21st century.
So once again, another topic, more than a minute to fully get into the weeds on this, but the easy answer is that there are no easy answers. Transportation funding and funding infrastructure are obviously vital to the economy, to the Wisconsin economy and to the local economy. But unfortunately, there are no easy answers. There is no one silver bullet that, oh, yep, we'll just do this one thing. Oh, yep, money comes out of thin air. No, because funds for infrastructure come from you, the taxpayer. So I'm always leery of the idea of raising taxes one way or the other. Right now, there's a fairly balanced approach, but we're always looking for new, innovative ways to fully fund infrastructure projects, not only today, but for tomorrow and for the next several generations into the future, because it's important. It's important now, and it's always going to be important.
Question 7. How will you communicate with your constituents?
So communication with voters is the key to democracy. But when you're talking to constituents, the most important thing that candidates and representatives in the assembly can do is listen. And if you listen to your constituents, you find out what their needs are, you find out what their concerns are. And if they're strong enough and if there's enough people that have the same concerns, then you bring what's in their best interest to Madison and try and solve those problems there. In terms of how I will communicate, I will always post on a website where I stand on a certain piece of legislation along with my reasoning, the bills that I'm working on to try and pass as legislations. I'll give progress reports on where we're at in terms of developing the legislation and where it is in terms of getting it passed. And then you have your fundamental, you keep going out and you keep talking with constituents, and you have your elementary, you have your phones, you have your emails, and you try and get back to your constituents as best you can from there. But it all starts with listening.
For me, it's very simple. Being open, honest, and transparent. That's what I will be. It's what I've been throughout this campaign. And from day one, that is the goal. I've been going out and talking with constituents since day one of this campaign. I've been listening to the concerns, and a lot of people have a lot of very valid concerns across the board, and there's a lot of very complicated issues. But being able to listen to them, going door to door, going to their house, talking with them is key, not only during campaign season, but during the legislative session as well. I believe very strongly in returning phone calls personally, because there's a lot that can be said and done face to face and over phone, then can be lost in email and mail in communication. So being as open, honest, and transparent as possible, that's what I'm all about.
I think the easiest answer to this question would be probably just to hold regular office hours, so you can meet with your constituents and have regular listening sessions. Now, where I live in DeForest, the previous person who held this office, I mean, he basically, for the most part, from what I knew, later in his career in the assembly, he would never come here. So, I mean, he was kind of like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. And the fact that we knew he existed, but we just never really saw him around these parts for whatever particular reason. I'm not sure why that was. And with some of these people now, from what I understand, the only way you can get through to these people is to go through a lobbyist. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. These people are supposed to be public servants. We're not, I mean, they serve us. We don't serve them. So thank you for the question. I appreciate it.
And up to question number 8. What area of the proposed state budget do you feel has the greatest opportunity for bipartisan agreement?
So I touched on this a little earlier, broadband expansion. It's an issue that impacts the district. It's an issue that impacts the state. And it's something that we need to have, we need to continue making progress to get everyone a quality high-speed internet. It's a bipartisan thing. There was a bill that would have funded broadband expansion to a much greater degree. Unfortunately, that didn't make it through. But I want to keep fighting. I want to keep fighting for broadband. Another area is, when we see additional revenues come through, getting people's hard-earned tax dollars back to them, because money comes from hardworking people. They work hard for their money, as everyone does. So when the government overcollects, it's important to return that money to the hardworking taxpayers after we've paid for our priorities and we've invested what we need to invest in.
Oh, that's a simple one for me. For me, it would probably be the transportation fund. Actually, when they came up with the gasoline tax indexing in the early 80s, it was actually a Republican who was a Secretary of Transportation, or he was in the Assembly. His name escapes me. He just passed away recently. And Governor Tony Earl. They actually were able to hammer this out and get this thing done, something called bipartisanship, which seems to, be lost now. And it's really not that difficult. Governor Walker, later in his term, he basically raised the user fees on state parks and whatnot. He said, or he raised the entrance fees and things like that. He said, well, it's a user fee. If you're using the park, then you should pay for it. So how is driving your car down the road any different? If you're buying gasoline to put in your car, isn't that technically a user fee because you're using the roads? So it seems pretty simple to me. I'm not quite sure what's so hard to understand about all that.
So we have a golden opportunity right now. So rather than give all that money away, which is what I'm assuming my Republican colleague was talking about with the surplus, we really need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in our roads. We need to invest in our bridges. We need to build capacity where we can. We need to build the infrastructure of the 21st century. We really need to get on solar power, wind power, electric vehicle charging stations. We need to have Wisconsin not only be the leaders in renewable energy products, we need to be the exporters of renewable energy products. So what's good for Wisconsin will be what's good for the United States. And if we start laying the foundations now, we can get on this and we can get after it and we can be the world leaders.
And our next question. Minimum wage in Wisconsin is presently $7.25 an hour and has not been raised since 2008. What do you feel it should be and why?
Yeah, that's a simple one. I thought about this for a while now. So you basically have the people on the left, the Bernie Sanders crowd on the national level saying it should be 15, fight for $15 an hour. And then you have the Republicans on the right saying 725 and we're not going to budge on it or move on it. I would think that maybe $10 an hour would be like a good starting point, because I don't think small businesses are going to be able to absorb that kind of a jump. But do I think the minimum wage, should be raised and they should raise it something? Yes. I mean, that's one thing I don't understand, why the Democrats and the Republicans can't come together and just give them something. It doesn't have to be to $15 an hour, or even like tipped waitresses. I don't think their wage has gone up since 1991. I think it's at $2.13 an hour, and they can't give them anything. Just boggles my mind.
So right now, if you were to say raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that actually has the purchasing power of $7.50 from 2008. So a little historical perspective here. Since 1980, the productivity in America has gone up by 72%. Wages have stagnated and gone up only 17%. We are severely underpaying our workers. And I hear the argument over and over again that small businesses will not be able to absorb this cost. But every time, this is an argument made every single time that we are discussing the minimum wage, and every single time that turns out not to be the case. If you focus on the demand side of the economy, you give people more money in their pockets, you spur more demand, and you improve the economy, not only for the people in the working middle class, but for everybody. You know, in essence, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we should really consider taking this to $15 an hour.
So for me, the answer is pretty simple. You know, as a free market capitalist thinker, I don't think that placing an arbitrary number and imposing that on our businesses, small and large alike, makes any sense. The market determines wages, and right now wages are looking very good. To me, it's hard to find a job right now where someone is making minimum wage. You go places, you talk with business owners, and they say, yeah, we're starting people at $15, $20, $25 an hour because we just can't find enough people to fill these positions. So an arbitrary number, it makes no sense. And wages are determined by the economy. And to artificially inflate something, okay, so that's great for the person at the bottom, but what about the person in the middle? What about the person who was making $14 an hour? Well, their pay increase is only $1 now. So then all of a sudden you've got to have this adjustment all the way from the bottom to the top, and it doesn't make any sense to throw out these arbitrary numbers.
If elected, what legislation would you like to introduce and why?
So I got a couple, I have a laundry list of priorities, to tell you the truth. But one of the first things that I would like to work with anybody, Republicans and or Democrats, is to work on some form of legislation to mitigate these mass shootings that are going on. I'm not talking about taking guns away. I'm not talking about, banning banning high capacity weapons or any sort of gun. I'm talking about figuring out a way to catch these warning signs early and to have a process where you could say you have a red flag law so that you can potentially save lives down the road. Combined with that, I really do feel that we need to get counselors into every school in every school district to really focus on the mental health of our students and our children. Again, the goal is to stop these mass shootings before they begin.
So for me, I touched on it briefly. The first bill that it's unfortunately someone beat me to the punch, is to get private money out of funding our elections. This goes back to a confidence thing in the American public. And the American public wants to know that the elections are fair and honest. And by and large, I believe that they are. But when you have someone who is artificially pumping money into the literal running of our elections and bringing in out-of-state operatives to assist with running the elections, it makes no sense. And there is no reason to put doubt in the minds of the American voters. So getting private money out of running our elections, it should be a bipartisan bill. It makes sense. I've been out on the doors every single day, and I've even spoken. I've spoken to Democrats who say, "Okay, well, are you a wild, crazy conspiracist? What are you going to do?" Well, I want to get private money out of the elections. Oh, makes sense. Of course, it makes sense, and it needs to happen.
Well, to my Republican colleagues' point, I believe the first thing for as far as legislation that I would like to introduce would be the reintroduction of SB 288 and AB 303, which deals with redistricting, taking after the Iowa model. And I would bring that bill to a public hearing, which is something that the Republicans that are running the show now can't seem to do for some reason. I haven't been able to determine why. Also, to Mr. Penterman's point about the private money, getting them out of the elections, I agree with that completely. That's one of the reasons why I'm running as an independent. If they're talking about private money, then I guess you don't need to look any further than the RNC and the DNC. One side on the left and the other on the right. Money has basically corrupted our politics all the way around.
Do you think that businesses should be allowed to require their employees to be vaccinated? And please explain your opinion.
The long and the short is no. Businesses, we have liberties and we have freedoms as American citizens. Personally, I am vaccinated, my wife is vaccinated, and that's great. That was our decision. We looked at the facts, we looked at what our options were, and we both chose to get vaccinated. And that was our decision. No one forced us to. No one said, "Oh, here, we'll give you, or you must do this, otherwise you can't work here." It goes against all the freedoms and liberties we have as citizens, and absolutely not. Private citizens should not be forced to get vaccinated against their will.
I do not think that businesses should be allowed to, I do not believe they should be allowed to require their employees to be vaccinated. I think that's a personal choice. And I think that's basically, going over the line. That should be a decision between the person and their healthcare provider as to whether that's something that they want to do. In the long and short of it. Thank you.
So our students, our children, when they go to schools, they have to have vaccinations. If they don't get vaccinations, we've run into a situation where smallpox has rebounded. We've run into situations where measles has rebounded. If an employer feels for their safety and for their customers' safety that people need to be vaccinated, you have a choice. You can either continue to work for that employer or you can find a new employer. We right now are in a situation where we have enough people who are not vaccinated that the Delta variant that's coming in here is it has the opportunity to mutate again in all these people that are not vaccinated. And if you want to be locked down again, a very good way to do that is not to be vaccinated. We need to incentivize everybody to be vaccinated. And if that one way is to have employers mandate it, so be it. And that way we'll reach herd immunity and we don't have to get locked down again. If you didn't like the first lockdown with this Delta variant, if this mutates again, you are definitely not going to like the second lockdown.
And a final question. What is the most important issue that we face in District 37?
I think the most important issue that we're facing right now from a political standpoint would probably be the redistricting and the gerrymandering, because that's where everything starts is at the ballot box. And I'd like to speak to the people that are living directly in Watertown now. If their town it's in 2 counties, I believe part of it's in Jefferson and part of it's in Dodge, as Mr. Penterman had said. But if Watertown was cut into 3 assembly districts and 3 Senate districts, would they think that's okay? Because all I heard in the Republican primary was, the Wisconsin Constitution requires that this is the way that we draw the districts. I don't think that's what they meant, that they were supposed to go into a room, sign an oath of secrecy, hide, and then read a book by, Robin Voss called How to Crack and Split Your Districts Without Really Trying. I don't think that was the whole point of it all, but, I could be wrong on that too. So that's basically where I stand on that.
I'm just going to piggyback off that. I couldn't have said that better myself, but I will piggyback off on that and say democracy itself. We're at a point right now where we have Republicans on one side, we have Democrats on the other side. And if we can't come together and if we can't figure out how to work together, nothing gets done. So we need to figure out a way to talk to each other. And if we actually do talk to each other, because I've been out there talking to constituents, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and what I find is that more often than not, we agree on most of the issues. And where we disagree is normally around the edges. So if we can just sit down, work out our issues, talk to each other in a civil tone, we can kind of lower the temperature right now and move forward. But I totally agree that we need to secure the ballot box, and we need to do a better job at nonpartisan redistricting.
Yeah, so just, I guess, to piggyback off of an earlier question for workforce development, the best thing we can do for our district right now is we can stop encouraging people not to work. This means that we need to eliminate that extra $300 per week unemployment benefit from the federal government. It is by far the biggest concern that I've heard from business owners, is that they can't find enough employees to fill these positions. It's impacting jobs from food service to manufacturing to agriculture. It's across the board. It's a huge problem, and we need to get Wisconsin back to work. By and large, the pandemic is behind us, so it's time to move forward and get rid of the extra $300 incentive to stay at home and not work.
In closing, each candidate will have 2 minutes to tell us why they are the best candidate for the State Assembly District 37.
So really quick, I just want to make it clear, abundantly clear, that there's not a labor shortage here. There's just a shortage of employers who are not willing to pay a livable wage. In terms of why I'm the best candidate, I would say that I am somebody who is driven. I am somebody who has ideas, and I am somebody who is willing to work with just about anybody to get things done. I'm willing to compromise on a whole host of issues in order to get things done, because that's the way bipartisanship works. I know I'm not going to get everything I want, but at the same time, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle won't get everything they want either. But by working together and crafting decent legislation, we will be able to get something done and to move Wisconsin forward. Now, the other reason why I am running is because I want to safeguard democracy and safeguard the ballot box. You see, Republican legislatures all over the country right now are passing laws that it makes it easier to suppress people's votes, and in some cases with surgical precision. Take Texas. They haven't passed it yet, but they want to pass a law that would ban driving more than 2 people to the polls. Well, who does that affect? That affects African Americans when they're doing souls to the polls. Georgia, they passed a law saying you can't hand out water to people. Well, when the lines are 6, 8, 10 hours long and then you're in the sweltering heat, as a result of closing down 700 plus polling stations, that law is meant to test your endurance in order to vote. The most disturbing aspect of these Republican bills is allowing the legislature to overturn the will of the people. No legislature, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should have this power ever. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that this legislation does not pass. If you vote for me, you vote for safeguarding democracy. If you vote for me, you vote for trying to move Wisconsin forward and to get things done.
So tonight we heard some of the ideas and platforms of the other candidates, and I thank you other two gentlemen for being here to discuss these important issues tonight. The decision on July 13th could not be clearer. Should we grow the size and scope of government, or should we maintain responsible levels of spending, oversight, and taxation? I'm the youngest candidate here tonight, but I bring the most to the table. I am dedicated to serving my community, my church, and my country. My background on the farm taught me the value of hard work and instilled in me a heart for service. As your state representative, I'm going to fight so that our communities can recover from the coronavirus pandemic. I will protect our rights and freedoms, and I will help our families get quality, affordable health care. As the only candidate running here with a law enforcement background, I support our law enforcement officers. They have always had our backs, and now I think it's long overdue that the politicians in Madison support our law enforcement officers as well. They have a hard job, and by and large, they are in it for the right reasons. They have a heart of service, and we need to have their backs. As a fiscal conservative, I will protect your hard-earned money, and I will oppose wasteful spending that grows the size of government and the bureaucracy. The people of the 37th Assembly District work hard, and they deserve a representative who will work hard for them. Thank you once again for the opportunity to discuss these very important topics, and I respectfully ask for your vote on July 13th.
Thank you again, ladies, for taking the time to have this forum tonight. And thank you to the other candidates for being here. I'd like to state by closing that I believe I'm the best candidate for this position, as in I have substantial real world experience. I understand the concerns and the issues of our district. I believe our political system is broken, and that the voices of the people living within the district, and for that matter across the state, are not being heard by either party, because I think the parties need to understand that they work for the people, not their own self-serving interest. As far as, which way I tilt, because I'm an independent, I tilt center right. My political role models for anybody questioning my conservative credentials would be Governor Tommy Thompson and President Ronald Reagan, who was president when I grew up. I mean, those are the two gentlemen that I look up to. Those people were able to actually roll up their sleeves like Governor Thompson would be at the concourse, the Governor's Club at the concourse, and he was roll his sleeves up with Chuck Walla and, have a drink or whatnot, dinner, just like President Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and that's how they got stuff done. But I guess now that seems like a quaint idea, because the parties have been taken over by the extremes on both sides. The Democrats have been taken over by the hard left, and the Republicans have been taken over by the hard right. And that's basically how it is now. It's basically either their way or the highway, and this cannot sustain itself. I mean, it just can't. So I believe our state government is sick. If you want to heal it, elect a medic. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much to our candidates for taking the time to be here tonight and for helping the voters get to know them better. Remember, Election Day is July 13th. Special elections tend to bring in fewer voters, so your vote is very important. For more information, go to myvote.wi.gov or contact your municipal clerk's office. Thank you for being a more informed voter. Good evening.
Thank you, everybody. That was fun.